everybody. Welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. I'm Jennifer Oraqua, COO of Projections, and your host for Project HR. Now, as leaders today, leaders of people, leaders of companies, and of communities, we know that over the past year, change has rapidly been thrust upon us at an unheard rate. And it's not that there's a lack of information out there. In fact, there's so much information available to all of us, I'd say we're in a state of decision fatigue. In short, we're stuck. Information overload creates a paralysis by analysis, and that sense of overwhelm can leave us with an inability to pivot when we need to most. Happily, this is a situation that can be overcome, and today we're joined by the man who wrote the book on how to do just that. Craig Lemasters is here. He is CEO of GXG Consultancy and the author of Unstuck: How to Unlock and Activate the Wisdom of Others. We're so happy to have you here, Craig.
Hey, thanks so much, Jennifer. It's a pleasure being with you. I love the work that you all do, and it's just a pleasure to share some thoughts with you today.
Thanks so much. So, Craig, you
Yeah.
were a CEO with a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah.
How much of what's in your book was learned on the job, battling real life stuck situations?
Actually, most of it. I mean, part of my journey, and I had the good fortune, Jennifer. I was with the same company for 27 years, and the last 11 years had the real privilege of serving as CEO. Or since it was a public company, I call it 44 quarters and not 11 years. But I just had the privilege to do that, and just I bumped into so many wise people that just taught me some really, really cool stuff. And so I'd say most of what's in the book, most of my our practice, and what I do now and it's really what motivated me was just to go share it with other leaders because I think we all get stuck on hard stuff. And so, yeah, it's all experiential based. I tell everybody when I start working with them or doing talks that I'm not coming at you as a thought leader or an academic or a traditional consultant. There's super smart people doing all those roles. Mine is just as an operator, and it's based on just the knowledge and experience that I was able to hopefully accumulate and mostly from some really wise people.
I love that. Far more real world than it is theoretical. That's what everybody actually
Yeah,
really needs right now.
I hope so. Yeah.
So I love the way you approach this book, dividing it into the first half, which is stuck, and the
Yeah.
second half, which is unstuck. Mostly because I feel like in order to free ourselves, we've got to understand what's holding us back. So I wanted to dig into
Yeah.
a little bit what it means to be stuck.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that because it actually sometimes offends people, and particularly when I meet CEOs for the first time or C-suite folks, which I just love doing. And I usually just ask them that right up front. What are you stuck on? And sometimes it takes people back. It's like, how dare
Mhm.
you? I mean, because but the definition for me is actually one, it's very important, but it's very simple, which is for me, again, as a leader, this is all experience based. When I was stuck, it simply meant that I hopefully had a destination defined and I just wasn't able to move very fast to get there.
Mhm.
But what it wasn't was, and this is really important to me, it wasn't that I was a bad person, that I wasn't trying hard, that we weren't working hard, that all of those things are not what I call being stuck. The stuck part is and if you picture, we both live in Georgia, so I always use the picture of like a pickup truck stuck in the mud and
Mhm.
the clay mud of
Sure.
Georgia.
Yep.
That's kind of what it feels like. We're just not
Mhm.
able to move very fast. So that's how I define stuck.
So, Craig, as a business leader myself, I,
Yeah.
I know what it's like to be unable to see the forest for the trees at times. So, what are the symptoms that indicate that a leader or a team is in fact stuck?
Yeah, so this idea of stuck on stuck applies the most, Jennifer, is when we're doing new things, or as I say, new stuff. So if I stick with that as the destination, the first symptom of stuck is we struggle defining the destination. I think there's
Mhm.
usually two or three or more paths to get to the destination. So
Mhm.
when I see a leader struggling with, what actually is that? It means we haven't picked a destination, really.
Hmm.
And that's one symptom. The other is, and we drew this picture in the book called Circle of Stuck. I like to have some fun with it because I thought it
Mhm.
was just my story. And now I've told the story a lot and it resonates with people.
Right.
But when we tend to do new stuff, it usually starts with a meeting. Pretty standard. Nothing wrong with meetings. I know we have to do them. But the challenge is in the Circle of Stuck is we have the meeting. It's usually a decent sized group of people. And then we start to carbon copy and blind carbon copy people on that. And then the group grows and it
Mhm.
gets bigger and bigger. And then people that weren't in the meeting get upset. So we have to have a second meeting and a third meeting. And I had a CEO actually interrupt me one time telling the story and said, "Hey, I think I have a record for you." I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." He said, "Well, I just saw an email with 347
Holy
CCs."
cow.
Yeah, that's kinda what I said, and I'm like, "Wow, that is a record." And he said, "I kinda got aggravated, but I never thought of it as we might be stuck." I said, "Well, think about the psychology of this. There is a reason that people are
Mhm.
doing that, and it might just be that they don't have the wisdom to break through this, the knowledge and experience as I would describe wisdom, and so the circle of stuff keeps moving around. So we're getting the spiral of these meetings. And then what we tend to do is bring in outside help, either traditional consultants, think tank people, design thinking. And again, there's nothing wrong with that if it's moving us towards the destination, right? But it typically doesn't. And then we do one of my favorite things, which is what we call buzzword salad. And I don't know if you've ever seen this, but what I did in my company, and I've seen it many times, is that we start to create our own vocabulary about but it's topic. Actually kind of funny when you pause and look at as we're trying to create this new stuff, why do we do that? Is it really having an impact on us getting unstuck or moving forward? So we complete this cycle, and unfortunately we go right back into the meetings, and this is when it really hit me because this was my company, that there was something missing. And so this diagnosis, right, of stuck, your question is really what drove me when I bumped into this idea of wisdom-based learning. It's really what drove me when I decided to leave public company life a few years ago to really build GXG. And that became the foundation is there's got to be a better way to break that cycle than we're all
Mhm.
frustrated with. And that's really what drove me.
I love that. So what role do expectations play? Expectations of ourselves, of others, of the outcome of the new thing, as you said. What role do expectations play in becoming stuck?
Yeah, I think expectations play a big role, but I'll use a little bit different, maybe phrasing for that. And it's this idea around humility.
Mm,
And I think part of the core of getting stuck is we either don't have enough humility or we don't even know that we necessarily should. And here's what I mean by that, right? Because we expect to grow the company, shareholders expect, or owners expect us to grow to the company. So we tend to be aligned around that. The challenge that I see universally now is, though, to go from our core business to this new stuff, we have to go grab this wisdom formula that we use. And again, I define wisdom very simply it's the intersection, it's the combination of both knowledge and experience. And
mm,
it really needs to be both.
mhm,
And so I think the misunderstanding and the lack of humility is when we get outside of our core business and we're doing new stuff, if it's a little ways out there, it doesn't have to be that far. Actually, both of those knowledge and experience tend to go down. That makes sense to most of us, right? We've never
mhm,
done that
mhm,
before
sure.
necessarily.
Mhm,
But here's the key it tends to go down exponentially and not just incrementally.
hmm,
And so this is the challenge and part of our work. And what I love to talk to leaders about is definitions of humility. This idea that are we humble enough to really be candid that we don't have the knowledge and experience to do this new thing.
mhm.
And that's what I really love talking to leaders about because and we actually have a scoring methodology that we go through when we talk about new plans and stuff so we can get pretty scientific about it, but I'm looking for that heart level connection with leaders to say, wow, this kind of makes sense. Just because I can make a good cup of coffee if that's my business, it doesn't necessarily mean I can make chairs or I can make pencils.
Right.
And that's okay. It's nothing to be ashamed of, right? Because we're working hard. Usually, if we're going to go into the chair business, we're working super hard. But you know what we're doing? We're sitting there in the circle of stuck, having the meetings and bringing people in, and there's nothing to break that chain.
Mhm,
And that's where this wisdom-based learning thing, again, was just such a big aha to me. But I would
mhm.
sort of turn the expectations around more for the number one criteria for this stuff to work is got to have a pretty high humility quotient.
I love that, and it's true as leaders, and business leaders in particular, we have high expectations for ourselves to
Yeah.
have all those answers, and so
Exactly.
humility doesn't really play into that. You have to have all the
No.
answers. So,
Yeah.
so that's definitely a learning curve for some of
We
us.
we kind of exasperate it with each other, right? I mean,
Mhm,
just the nature of a quote promotion. I mean, it's called
mhm,
a promotion. I tell
right.
the story that, after many years with the company, and then I got elected to be CEO, and I'll never forget my first day on the job. I walk in same way I did every other day. Get on the elevator. Elevator's packed at rush hour. Doors close. Everybody stopped talking. And I turned around and I'm like, "What's going on? Is there a problem?" And like everybody's looking at their shoelaces. I get off of the seventh floor, go to my brand new big office, and my longtime assistant, I'm like, "Debbie, what happened? Did I miss something?" And I told her the story, and she literally looked at me and says, "You don't get it, do you?" I'm like, "You don't get what? What?" It's like, "Well, they expect you to kind of know everything now, and their livelihoods really depend on you. And everything changed yesterday." And I
Yeah,
literally looked at her.
right?
I wanted to go curl up in the fetal position and suck my thumb and say,
Right.
"Nobody told me that." Come on. But that's really it, because the expectation is that you do know everything and you have experience in everything. And the reality is we don't. Just
Right.
be humble enough to admit it. And there's people out there that do. There's
Yep.
tons of wisdom out there. It's
Right.
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So in your book, you
Yeah.
shared some stuck stories from history. Could you share one of those with us?
Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of them that, we just picked a few, but one of my favorites, because my uncle worked there, was Kodak, and Kodak is just an iconic brand and a company that most people know, particularly with my generation, and I just think it's a great example where that they had an opportunity to take that leap into the new stuff, if you will,
Mhm,
which we all know
mhm,
now is digital, and they just couldn't see clear of it. And here's the irony, is that they were so stuck in their ways, and yet they had people we now know in the organization that had the wisdom that could have taken them there.
mhm.
But again, it goes back to, didn't have enough humility, because that's how we took pictures,
Yep.
and didn't have enough humility to say, and they didn't even need to go outside, which is what we do, and we recommend it's usually outside of your company. They actually had that within the company, and a lot of those same people were part of digitizing that whole company.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, and there's so many of them. I mean, uh, Blockbuster is another one of the favorites if you look at it, and then many
Mhm.
modern
Sure.
day ones right now. I mean, the poor taxi business. I mean, I feel sorry. Back when we were traveling, every time I get off and the plane, and you go out at LaGuardia Airport, and I don't know if you remember, that taxi line used to be really, really long, and now it's just taxis waiting there. I'm like,
Yep,
wow,
yep,
they could have done that differently, if you have the humility to say, we got to go do the new stuff.
yep,
And you know what, doing taxis that way versus the new way was a pretty big leap,
yep.
and didn't have the knowledge and experience to do it. So yeah, lots of fun examples, but they're pretty hard.
Yeah. It's all about that pivot, right? And, obviously, COVID-19 has been a huge disruption
Oh my.
that's impacted our workplaces on a global level. Do you think
Yeah.
that the crisis has exposed the degree to which organizations are stuck?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and again, the numbers say, speak for themselves. But unless you're, Amazon or home improvement. I mean, there's a couple of industries that are thriving during
Mhm,
COVID, but
mhm,
kind of the all others, it's really hard. I mean, I think we would all agree with that.
mhm,
Um, the other thing I think is interesting for the work that I'm so passionate about now is, if you look at some of the McKinsey data, especially the last even few weeks, that leadership surveys, one that really caught my eye was that 79% of leaders now say they don't have the skills and the support and other things to grow their organization after
mhm.
COVID.
Yep,
And that's a pretty shocking number. I
yeah,
mean, almost 80% are saying, "Help! I don't know how we're going to do this."
yeah.
And there's a way. That's why. I mean, I was sharing earlier today with some folks that I think the unstuck methodology that we've tried to teach. It was growing and very popular pre-COVID, and now it's even become more popular. And again, I
Mhm.
hate the reason, because none of us want to be in a
Right.
pandemic,
Yes.
but I do love the humility, and I would say that 79% number is a good indicator that overall humility is rising. That many people, even in a survey, would say, I don't think I have what it takes on my own to figure this out. So
Yeah.
I think that part's encouraging.
Definitely, definitely, and you say that 79% is shocking, but it's really not, as somebody who's in it, I relate to
Yeah,
that. I mean,
you
I
get
really
that.
do. It's
Yeah.
definitely a difficult place to be in, to not have the tools that you need to move things forward and handle everything that's coming
That's
at you from
right.
all different directions, so
And I think that's right, Jennifer. And I also think people are much more aware about this new stuff. And I know it's not a technical consulting term, but
new
I tend to
stuff.
use simple
Yeah,
terms. Is
right.
that, adjacencies, new
Sure.
markets, new products, whatever. You get the idea.
Yeah.
But I
Mhm.
think there is also awareness that what got got us here pre-COVID is probably not going to be enough to get us to the next place. And if
Mhm.
you just look at digital, everybody's business, whether we like it or not, has been digitized in some level. If it's just Zoom calls, if it's
Mhm.
just that, it's different. And I think there's an awareness that, boy, if we're not reinventing at some level the business model after this, and we've talked about it maybe for years, but if we're not doing it now and getting ready, we are left behind super quickly. And you don't have to go very far to look to your left or you look to your right right now and see companies that are just gone. They're
Yep.
just gone.
Yep.
And so again, that's really hard, but as a person that got to lead and sort of a student of leadership and helping other leaders now, I think there's some real positives in there. Let's just be really candid about it, that we've got to get the wisdom to get out of this, and we
Mhm.
better have our priorities right, and we better make choices as leaders like never before. And I see that happening. I think there's some encouraging signs of that, with at least with our client base.
Absolutely. Yep. I love that. All right, Craig, we're going to take a sponsorship break right now. But now that we know what it means to be stuck, when we return, we're going to learn how to get unstuck.
Awesome.
So stay with us.
Thanks for listening. Also, thanks to A Better Leader for supporting this week's episode of Project HR. A Better Leader is leadership training that brings your leaders into alignment. A Better Leader's online platform improves engagement and morale and directly affects your bottom line. Get your free 2-week trial at abetterleader.com.
We're back with Craig Lemasters, author of Unstuck: How to Unlock and Activate the Wisdom of Others. So, Craig, if our audience listened to the last segment and realized that, wow, we might be stuck, the good news is there's hope, and it begins with acknowledgement of the problem, right?
Absolutely, and it gets back to the humility factor. Just
Mhm. Mhm.
and there's lots of ways to judge that, Jennifer. Again, I like the idea that it's not that we're not moving forward, we're just not moving at the speed that we want. And
Mhm.
I say that because that's what I hear time and time again is, hey, we feel pretty good about the direction, but it's just never going to be fast enough the way we're doing it. And that's the
Mhm.
acknowledgement that I'm certainly looking for.
Mhm. And solving those knowledge gap problems, like the root of the
Yeah.
stuck problem, that begins with that same challenge, that humility, acknowledging and identifying where we need help, right?
Yeah, that's right, and we share in the book. I mean, again, I try to share the whole methodology in the book. I mean, if we can help, that's great. But I want leaders to be able to look at this because I know it works. It worked for me. It's worked, all over the place in the last 4 years.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
want to be transparent. Just say, hey, here's some tools to do it. So the way I like to do it is through a simple ecosystem. Everybody knows how to draw ecosystems, right? And so just put in the middle of your ecosystem what your destination is. And I don't care if it's a product, if it's a goal, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's just a destination. And
Mhm.
then just draw the ecosystem bubbles, no more than four, preferably two or three. What are the imperatives when it comes to knowledge and experience, AKA wisdom? What are the wisdom imperatives that you would have to be really, really good at to get to the
Mhm.
destination? And it's a fun exercise. I mean, it's amazing how quickly people can do this. But here's where it gets hard. So if you take a bucket and let's say your destination is something related to digital and one of your wisdom buckets is I got to be great at data. Okay, let's break data down now. What does that actually mean for your organization? Right? What part of data analytics or data mining, whatever it might be, what do you have to be really good at? So you picture that ecosystem getting kind of bigger and bigger, right? And then what we encourage people to do is just self score it. What's the probability today? You know the wisdom in the room. You know your own knowledge and experience in those buckets, and you know your teams, and just self score it. We do this for clients all the time, and it is a blast. And the reason it is, nobody really knows why we're scoring it. But what we do is
Right.
we score these component parts, and then you add it up. And guess what? You have a pretty good idea of what's the probability of getting to the destination. Yeah, so we've been doing this for 4 years nonstop, and nobody has ever scored above about 65%. And these tend to be the big, meaningful destination, the goals,
Mhm.
if you will.
Mhm.
And I when we get the score like that, we did one of these right before COVID shut down travel at a big company in California. All the senior teams there, a huge initiative that the chairman wants done, and we finished it. They scored about a 52% on it. Their numbers, not mine. Once I explained what that meant, they all wanted to change the numbers. I'm like, no, you can't change the game now. I said, here's a better question for you. Which one of you is going to walk down the hallway and tell the chairman that after 3 years you have 52% chance of getting to the goal line? I mean, right? I mean, that's the reality, but that's the level of reality, of acknowledgement, of humility that we have to have. Because the good news is to go find those buckets of wisdom where you scored really low. There's people all over the place that have already done that. They've
Mhm.
done these things. I mean, most of the stuff we're not inventing for the first time.
Mhm.
And so where it gets exciting, is that's how we break this circle of stuck, is let's go interject that wisdom into the conversation.
Yeah,
That's
well,
it. It's a
yeah.
simple solution. Now, there's lots of ways to do it, but that's how we get there, though, is through the ecosystem exercise.
So as you're talking, I'm in my own head, I'm designing these ecosystems around
Perfect.
the goals that we have, and
Perfect.
so
I
I'm
love that.
so, of course, the subtitle of the book is how do you activate the wisdom of others?
Right.
So, can we just hire our way out of these knowledge gaps? Can we just bring in that knowledge? How does that work?
I mean, sure you can. More power to you. But I would argue that most of the wisdom is we look at it on two vectors. I want to bring wisdom in the room that can help solve what you're stuck on, that piece of it. But I also want them to teach our clients that wisdom. So we were doing two things at the same time. Because what I would argue, most of us that have run companies, it's not practical to think that on every topic where we're deficient in wisdom, we can just go hire the best of the best people. I mean, I don't know, maybe Amazon could do that, or Google, but most companies that we work with, which are a lot of great Fortune 500 companies and great small companies, you can't do that, and you don't have to do that.
Hmm.
I mean, here's the coolest part about the whole thing, is the spirit of reciprocity is alive and well.
Mm,
If you ask people in the right way, in the right organized, thoughtful way, they will share every ounce of their wisdom with you. And that's all we do. We
mhm,
try to do it in the right way. We do it in a very organized, deliberate, intentional way, and people will pour out their wisdom. So why
mm,
wouldn't you rather rent it and learn it and having to
right,
buy it? You
right,
don't
for
have to.
sure,
I mean,
for
if you can
sure.
afford to, more power to you. You don't need to read the book. You can put the book down, but most of us can't.
Right, right. So I'm thinking this through, and I'm wondering. So we fill the knowledge gaps. How do we then become unstuck? So we have the knowledge that we need. How do we then actually like bust through the things that are holding us back?
Yeah, and again, the way we then translate, if your folks are listening, buy into this idea that this would be helpful. You take those bubbles, those circles we're deficient in, and now they're in the room, metaphorically or literally.
Hmm.
Doesn't
Hmm.
matter. We got lots of formats.
Hmm.
So what I want to do is say, okay, now it gets very granular, right? So back to that data example, there's parts of that you don't understand, that these folks have already done. So what we're doing, and again, I don't like high tech in these environments. We don't use any PowerPoints. We don't use any presentations. These are whiteboards and flip charts.
You
But
know
what
that
we're doing,
a few members of our audience just died a little bit inside. You know.
okay, that's okay. Stick with me, because
Yep.
what I want to do is hand these folks the marker, and we have sort of a proprietary process we use, but we hand them the marker and say, let's connect the dots from your wisdom to that destination.
Hmm.
So we start doing a series of these, we call them breakout readout things, where we're actually solving the real issue. Close this plant, not that plant,
Hmm.
right? Use
Hmm.
this chemical, not that chemical. This is really practical business, right? This is not, super high level, hieroglyphic, sexy
Hmm.
stuff. Quite
Hmm.
frankly, this is where business hits the road. But
Hmm.
guess what happens through a series of those? We call it rapid cycle learning. This goes so fast because these people have done it, right? And our clients are sitting there going, "Wow, I kind of thought we should do that." But now I've got somebody who did it and it worked, telling me it's okay. I can make the decision immediately.
Hmm.
So you do that and you cycle through that over and over and over again over a very short period of time. And guess what's happened? You'll look up, and sometimes within hours, sometimes it takes us 3 meetings, and these are longer meetings. The time frame depends on the complexity. But every time we've done this the last 4 years, you'll look up at some point and you're unstuck, right? Meaning you either are at the destination or you have an optimized, clear way to get
Hmm.
there because you've made the decisions. And again, I should have started this or mentioned this at the start, Jennifer. I define leadership super simple. I know there's a million definitions. They're all probably pretty good. Mine is, we get paid as leaders to make choices.
Hmm.
Everything else is periphery. Everything else is secondary.
Hmm.
And so all I'm trying to do is put people in the room that can help you make those choices much faster and much better. And that's what happens. You put the wisdom around you in this little cocoon, and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't take very long for it to transfer. If it's done and we prefer a very highly facilitated environment so we don't get sidetracked and start talking about, friends and family and stuff that we all
Right.
love.
Right.
We stay focused on the destination. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's how I would define unstuck. And I will tell you, it is so much fun to see leaders like myself who's sitting there going, I just promised we were going to be a great digital company, and I really don't know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we all do that on our own topics. And it's so much fun for me. It actually brings me, which is why I'm doing this, it brings me a lot of joy
Mm-hmm.
to see leaders very early in this process go, wow, other people have done this. Now they've taught me I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
I can do this. And again, this is how I think we were supposed to learn. If you look at the history of education, literally from the very beginning, this is how education worked. It was the wisest people teaching in very small groups or one-on-one people that needed to learn the hard stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've gotten away from that, particularly corporately. We just don't do it. We just don't do it. We leave it up to people to go figure it out, or we send them
Right.
to classes. It's an easy solution, and a lot of that stuff is great. But when we're going to solve the hard stuff, boy, you put wisdom in the room and facilitate it, and you make the choices very quickly.
I love that. And that kind of brought up another point for me, which was, relationships with outside counsel, with
Yeah,
employees. What's the role of connection? You talked about the law of reciprocity. I don't know if you've read The Go Giver,
yeah,
but that idea of giving to one another. What is the role of connection in becoming unstuck?
yeah. It's absolutely the secret sauce of this. It's matching up this very humble admitted wisdom gap with the right person who has the wisdom but is also willing to share it. And it's funny, people ask me all the time, well, like, what does your firm get paid to do? And I said, well, we a couple things. One is is building the process that we now use to create that right fit. So
Hmm.
somebody might have the knowledge and experience, but if they're not the right fit, it's kind of like hiring people, to be honest with you, even though it's a very temporary thing they work on. But that's the secret sauce to this. If we get that right and they're really willing to share the right wisdom,
Hmm.
what ends up happening is, and we're told this every week literally from board members, that I ended up learning more than I think I shared. And that's where the reciprocity comes
Yep.
from. And
Yep.
here's the other kind of magical thing that happens during this is you put people in this kind of environment and they solve something together. It's
Hmm.
amazing. So they kind of become friends for life after these board meetings or whatever format we're
Yeah.
using because they solved something really hard together. Now, after 4 years of doing this, I mean, we have people that have maintained the relationships. We've helped them nurture them. We've done more business with both of them, helping each of them solve stuff. And
Hmm.
again, that's for me, it's a blast. That's how we should operate because we. The cool thing is, on solving these very hard challenges, these stuck topics, it's actually better to use people outside of the industry. So there's never a competitive issue. I mean,
Hmm.
some of them may have worked in there at the same industry in the past, but it's usually better to have people with completely different industry experience because the topics are still the same. Right, but they have a very different perspective. So it
Hmm.
is those relationships that are essential. That chemistry, that give and take, that sort of bilateral learning has to happen for this to work. And I can tell you the cool thing is, like I said earlier, it is a, not to overblow it, but it's encouraging kind of just in mankind. People love doing this.
Sure. Yeah.
They love our work.
Yeah.
Someone asked me the other day, how do you get all these board members and this thing? And I said, it's actually been the easiest part of our business model because every board member has wanted to do additional board. And these are people working full time. These are not
Hmm.
consultants, but they want to do more work because they've learned and grown so much and they enjoy it.
Sure.
But then they want to go tell people about it. So it's been all organic. I mean, we've just
Hmm.
been able to organically find people that want to share their wisdom.
I love that. So, Craig, we're going to take some time out for another quick break. We'll be
Sure.
right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Oraqua, and our guest today is Craig Lemasters, author of Unstuck: How to Unlock and Activate the Wisdom of Others. And we're back. Craig, I want to know, are there ways that we can be proactive about this problem? Steps we can take to potentially avoid becoming stuck in the first place?
Absolutely. I would say, I mean, my recommendation to your listeners would be number one, talk about humility and be super candid with your team. Action. And I love what you said earlier, Jennifer, that you were starting to draw the ecosystem. I want everybody to do that. Just take out a scratch piece of paper, get on a whiteboard, and draw a circle in the middle and say, what it really is our destination. And what I found, I did this, I think, Friday with some folks that popped by our office here, is three leaders. Everybody put the destination in there. And guess what? There were three different answers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And again,
Yeah.
generally similar, but not really. It's in the detail,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So the one thing I would encourage people to do is get with your teams, be very clear about the destination. Number two, be super candid about what wisdom you have, and then score yourselves.
Mm.
The best way to prevent being stuck, like the Kodak story and others, many other stories, is to have the humility up front to say, you know what, we're getting ready to embark on our coffee business. Let's reverse it. We make chairs. Now we want to make coffee. Let's be really candid. What do we have to be amazing at to be in the coffee business? And do we really have the knowledge and experience to do that? And if you have any low scores, that's how you prevent it. Let's go find that now and not
Yeah.
wait
Yeah.
until we've spent a bunch of money and we're in the circle of stuck. Because what you're going to do is go have the meetings, go bring in the outside help, do the buzzwords, and you're going to have 347 people copied on an email one day and look up and go, we're still not in the coffee business.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what we wanna prevent, but I would do those 2 things are absolutely essential.
Love that. So we've been talking a lot about being stuck on a corporate level,
Yeah.
but can someone be stuck on a personal level as well?
Oh, I'm so happy you asked me that, and I told you before we started that this whole world you're in, I mean, I'm super biased as a former CEO of a big company. I think that the world of HR and how we think about people is so underleveraged, and I felt that until I had an amazing CHRO that really helped me learn this, and now I see it with so many companies, and the answer is a profound absolutely there is. And so
Mm.
I didn't even intend to get into the individual leadership part of this. The board work is what was so impactful for me. And we actually had a client ask about 3 years ago, would I and some of the team members here coach the people on the board, their
Hmm.
internal people? And my answer was trying to be humble, saying, "Hey, I'm not an executive coach. I don't have a psychology degree. I'm not trained in the behavioral stuff." And it was interesting that the client actually said, "No, could we do the same thing we're doing for the company for the individual?" And I thought, "Wow, that's pretty interesting." So we created a couple years ago what we call impact coaching, which is just a reimagined way to think about leader coaching, which is, guess what? We put the person, the leader, in that middle circle, and the
Mhm.
ecosystem are the two or three things that they need to have exceptional wisdom that they don't today.
Hmm.
But I'm really passionate because they do go hand in hand. And I'm glad you asked it because you got the organizational stock. But if the leaders aren't also learning this really hard stuff that we don't have, then
Mhm.
again, it's just a temporary fix. So they do go hand in hand.
Mhm. For sure. Well, and on that note, you started your company GXG back in 2016, and I mean,
Yeah.
by all accounts, it's not your average management consultancy.
A
Can
little
you tell us
different.
a little bit about what GXG does and why you guys are so different?
Yeah, so everything we do is based on the methodology I just described, wisdom-based learning, and we only have two core product offerings. We do advisory boards, which sort of solve the hard corporate stuck issues, right?
Mhm.
And then we do
Mhm.
impact coaching, which is again kind of our coaching reimagined on the individual leader side. And there's lots of variants on both of those, but those are the two core offerings. And yeah, I mean, I think we really aren't a traditional consulting firm
Mm.
because again what I struggled with in traditional consulting was it was sort of a mono view of the problem. So if my firm had an academic sort of based position on a topic, that's what I'm going to deliver. And I contrast that with ours when we're faced, let's take that digital topic, then I
Mhm.
want to have 4 or 5 people that have actually done this stuff
Mhm.
at the
Right.
table. So
Yeah.
it's a very different model.
Mhm.
And again, one of the ways I describe it is it's what I would call an operator based model. Everybody that helps us are operators. We
Mm.
don't have any consultants or thought leaders. I think there's a place for all that. It's super important, but when we're fixing stuck topics,
Mhm.
It's 100% people like you. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
with your background, you have fixed a lot of stuff
Uh-huh.
people-wise in
Yeah.
companies.
Yeah.
So this is the whole purpose of today is I'm going to convince you to be on one of our boards to help somebody get unstuck. So
I would love that. I would like
yeah,
some people to help me get unstuck as well.
absolutely. We can
I
do
love
that as
I love
well.
the idea of the unstuck coaching sessions.
Oh, it's so much fun. So
So
much
so
fun.
how can our listeners find more out about GXG?
Yeah, well, first of all, I try to be super transparent. I'm doing this because I really do have a passion, having sat in that chair for 11 years. I know how hard these jobs are. So, my passion is to help people get unstuck. If we can help you, that's awesome, but we try to be super transparent. So, the book is out. It actually was released officially today. So, our book Unstuck is out on Amazon today. And our website is gxg.co. Co. We put a lot of stuff out there, case studies, methodologies. We want to be really transparent. My speaker website is craiglemasters.com if you're interested in any of that. And then love to connect with people on LinkedIn. So if anybody wants to follow, try to publish a lot of content there, love to connect with people on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and you have a pretty decent blog on your website as well, I
Well,
noticed.
thank you.
So links to the GXG website and to Craig's website, as well as a link to how to buy Unstuck, how to unlock and activate the wisdom of others, will be included in this episode's companion guide. So be sure to sign up for it today at projectionsinc.com/podcast. But right now, Craig, it's time for our lightning round questions. These are questions we ask of every guest of the podcast. Are you ready?
I am ready. Let's go.
All right. Yay. So we start with a topic showdown. In this episode, we've been talking a lot about being stuck. Craig, I have a feeling I know your answer already, but then again, you do live in Atlanta, so this question may pose more of a challenge than previously thought, so we'll see. In your opinion, which is worse, being stuck in a rut or stuck in traffic?
Absolutely stuck in the rut. That's my whole life's work now is fixing that, and we're just used to traffic. So that's it.
Yep. So what's the best book you've read recently?
Big fan of Angela Duckworth's book on grit. We use it in a lot of our practice.
Oh, yeah.
If you haven't studied grit, it's one of the highest correlations of any cultural thing you can do in an organization for success. So highly recommend it.
Excellent. Love that. So tell me, what is your favorite thing about working as a consultant?
I just love the people part of it. I get to talk to, like you, just amazing people all day and help get unstuck. It's a real privilege.
Me too. I'm with you there.
Yeah.
So what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Yeah, so the chairman of the company I grew up in, American Bankers, which was the predecessor to Assurant, where I spent 27 years, came in one day, and it was back in the old school, called me by my last name, and he would always yell at me for various things. He said, Lemasters, is there anybody in your organization that you wish would resign today? And I was super confused by that because he turned around and left, and I worried he was talking about me. And about 6 months later, he actually explained it to me, and it's never left me, because if you look at exits of leaders, they tell you the hardest thing is what? Making people changes. So what he taught me was that headset of, if I come in today and there's somebody that I wish would resign, then I should probably make that change. And it made it a much more human thing for me. And I always use that because it was usually better for them and for us. So that was one of the really impactful things that helped me immensely.
Wow. Love that. That's fascinating. That's good insight.
Yeah.
So tell me, who or what inspires you?
Oh, so many things. I'm a sports fanatic, so most of the stuff, and I tried not to do it today, there's always sports analogies everywhere.
Right.
But I had some amazing people in my life. My dad was one. He was an amazing CEO, so I got to watch him operate, and he taught me humility. Super humble man. I've had two pastors in most of my adult life that really taught me about the bigger lessons in life. And then the third, not to leave out, is my wife, who's a doctor. She's a radiologist, and took the lead on raising all four of our kids, including twins, and her passion and heart level of everything she does has been an inspiration to me forever.
I love it when we're inspired by those close to us. Yeah. So thanks for joining me today on this week's episode of Project HR, Craig. And I wanted to thank our listeners. As always, this is your reminder to grab the companion for this episode at projectionsinc.com/podcast. And if you'd like to be on Project HR or know someone who would, feel free to email us at projecthr@projectionsinc.com. To make sure you never miss an episode of Project HR, we hope you'll subscribe to the podcast, and if you're feeling it, drop us a line, leave us a review, or simply rate us 5 stars wherever you get your content. And last but not least, we want to remind you that this November, Project HR will be celebrating its 1-year anniversary. We'll be marking that occasion with a Best of show, as well as a massive book giveaway contest where one lucky listener will win a copy of every book featured on the podcast this year. And yes, that will include the book we discussed on this very episode, so thank you, Craig, for taking part in that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. What a blast talking to you today, Jennifer. Thank you.
Stay tuned for more information on how to enter to win, and good luck. That's it from me for now. Let's make it a great day at work.